Hi, welcome to Diary.io, another episode of hands-on project-based learning. Today we will be working on another project. I'm sure you had an experience project 1, 2, through to 4. So today we will be working on project 4, which is simply main stack deployment to Ubuntu in AWS. So we will be discussing along the way while we get our hands dirty. So one of the requirements for this project is to use AWS. So I believe you've understood what this stack are all about, and the main stack is a software stack for software development. In this case, it's main, which is MongoDB, Express, Angular, and NodeJs. So we are trying to build a simple book register application that has a front end using Angular framework and also have a back end Express that stores information on a database, which is MongoDB, that is running on a Node.js JavaScript runtime environment on the browser. So we are going to implement all this and on AWS using Ubuntu operating system. And so to get started, these are steps we need to follow through. This project requires you to go through each step, document your learning. This project requires you to take screenshots. This project also requires you to own your learning, to put it in your own wordings so you can be able to communicate your learnings. And do not forget to submit it via the Google Drive. Also, it's very important that you learn about the Open Systems Interconnect model, which is the OSI model. So you will understand more about how different nodes or systems in a network communicate, how information is being exchanged from one point to another. It's going to give you a fresh perspective of the whole communication model. And also you need to understand about load balancing, even though we won't do it in this project, but in the future projects, precisely let's say project 8, you will be learning about load balancing and the different techniques on how to set traffic for your load balancing. Okay, and you need to also learn about HTML and CSS, okay, which is the hypertext markup language, cascading style sheet, and the JavaScript language. So this is majorly the bare bones of web applications. Okay, so these links here externally will help you to get started and become familiarized with it. So let's just get down to the project. First thing I need to do is to ensure I have my AWS set up. So I will just go here and just type aws.amazon.com. Before we proceed with this, if I'm too fast, my progression pace is faster than you can bear. You can always slow down, or you can always pause and rewind, or reduce the speed of the recording, and I'm sure you'll be able to get everything I will say to you in the course of this project hands-on. So let's sign in. Let's sign into our AWS and let's get started. Okay, now we will be using EC2. You can always search EC2 here. I believe if you've done 1 through 4 till now, you should be able to get started with this. So we do not have any instance currently running. Alright, so we need to launch our instance. So just click here, launch instance, and launch instance. Alright, okay, now we are requested the documentation requests that we spin up an EC2 instance on a T2 Nano family using Ubuntu version 20. Okay, so those are the parameters we will use. So I always prefer to just type Ubuntu here, and we're going to click enter. Okay, and click select. Alright, now we've selected Ubuntu. Ensure that you have T2 micro eligible. Okay, so the next thing you need to do, you can always leave just one instance. I sometimes want to leave 2 instances so that I can always create, and if anything happens I can destroy and work with the next one. So if it has the, and one other thing I love doing is I love running some bash scripts here, whereby I run scripts like sudo apt update and upgrade. So while the instance is booting up, it does all those processes for me. So but in this case we'll just leave everything as default and get on. Now the default storage, the EBS volume, we're using 8 gig, so do not worry at this moment, just move on. So let's give it a name, a tag. Let's say this will be project 4 server. Let's call it project 4 server. Let's give it that, that's fine. And click to move to the next one. So we'll just work with the default name in this case, and you can always give it a security group name if you want to. You can just say project 4 SG. You can give it a description if you prefer, SG 4 project 4. You can always give more details. Now this protocol rules, we're just going to work with SSH, the default, and in the course of the project we will add more rules as required. So I'll just click on review and launch. So do not bother about this red notification here. It's just trying to let you know that your instance is open to the world and anybody can SSH into your instance. Okay, which is not ideal, it's just a warning, but it's fine. This is not a production development. So let's click launch. Alright, so I already have my key pair. I just acknowledge and launch instance. Alright, now so let's click here, or you just click here to go to your instance. Alright, good. Now we have our instance ready. Let's go back to our documentation. So the project suggests you go back to project 1 if you find it very difficult on how to create this instance. It is very important you learn and get good grasp on how to create this instance. And please do not forget to create a T2 Nano family instance. That's the free tier. So now, as a hint, in previous projects we used a different tool to connect on EC2 instance, but if you do not want to install or launch anything outside of AWS, you can open your CLI straight from the web console in AWS, and that's true. Now this demography here gives you an illustration on how this works. So from this instance, once you have your instance state running, you're good to go. Now when you click on this, you can have details down here. You could always use the slider to take it down, and especially if you have more instances running here. So in this case we do not have. I'll just scroll it up here. So you just click on connect at this point. Once you've selected the instance, you click connect, and from this point you notice we have EC2 instance connect, session manager, and SSH client tabs. Now these are 3 different tabs. Okay, so from this first tab, EC2 instance connect, you just come here and click connect, and that's all. So AWS will give us direct access to its console. And that's it. Hula, we are in. It's that easy. You do not need an external application to connect to SSH into EC2. Now, although we could always use git bash, we could always use what is it called, putty. We can also use mobile xterm, which I believe you're familiar with. So we just get on with it. So now this is where we are. I always love to have a clean screen. You could always use Ctrl-L. Now I also prefer to use sudo-i to move to the root account so I can work from here. But so you can get a good grasp and we can follow the documentation, we will just go back to the Ubuntu user account. Alright, and invoke the administrator privilege. Okay, now from the documentation, our task is going to be to implement a simple book register using the min stack. And to build this project, which is going to be running on the browser. Now, remember that this project, because it's a min stack, there will be a server, right? Okay, now this project requires us to install NodeJs, which is a JavaScript runtime environment. So for us to get NodeJs installed, to make our system and our browser act as a server, we need to install NodeJs. So to install NodeJs, you use this command called you need to update your account. Okay, right. The first thing you always do when you get into an instance is to update and upgrade. Now you do all those things because if you have older applications on the instance, because there could be updated versions, and it's always important that you update and upgrade so that your instance can have the most recent version to avoid any compatibility issue. So in this case, I'm just going to say sudo apt update, and we're good to go. So it's updating, and if there's anything to update, we will know. Okay, good. So let's clear. The next thing we need to do is sudo apt upgrade. You can always put -y in case there's anything to upgrade. It can automatically upgrade it without prompting me to hit yes or no. Okay. So as you can see, it's making progress. Okay. So while it's doing that, the next thing we need to install NodeJs, so which is sudo apt install -y NodeJs. And I told you the reason for the -y, so that you can skip the prompting of yes while installing NodeJs. So we'll come here. So the installation is done. You can always clear the screen if you want to have a clear screen like me. So in this case, we have to install NodeJs, sudo apt install. You can always put the flag here and put NodeJs, or you can say NodeJs and use -y. It works. So we are installing NodeJs, and that's it. It's as simple as that. NodeJs has been installed. Okay, now how do you confirm that? You can say node -- version. Let's see. This is version 10. So we have NodeJs installed. Alright, good. Although, okay, let's move on. If you go to NodeJs, the latest version for NodeJs is actually version 15. because there are versions for it. So but this project will still work with what we have currently, so you can always say sudo apt upgrade is also going to upgrade this version of Node. Now, but let's work with what we have. It's fine. It's going to get the job done. So the next step is to install MongoDB, which is our document database where our information will be stored. We are creating a book register, so as we register information, it's going to be stored somewhere locally. So now, to install MongoDB, we first of all need to add MongoDB key to our key server. So we're going to copy this. I double clicked on this twice to copy this. Then you go here. I Control V to paste it. Control V. You can use Command V to paste it if you're using a Mac. I think the keyboard layout is the same thing for both Linux and Windows. So the next thing we need to do is we need to add a repository for MongoDB. Control V. Okay, we're good to go. Alright, so the next instruction from our steps is to install MongoDB. Okay, of course, you know you can always copy and paste, but I always like to type this command so that I can get used to it. It gives you this feeling of a ninja. So let's install MongoDB. So we can say sudo apt install -y or MongoDB-y, whichever. So MongoDB. Now you need to be very certain you are typing the right and appropriate commands, else you get a funny error. So it's very, very important you are very certain with your letters and not miss any. Okay, so we've installed MongoDB. Now it's very important, one of the things you learn as a DevOps engineer is to be very certain that most applications requires, when you install most application, it has a daemon, a service that runs on the background to ensure that this program is running effectively and monitors this and keeps logs of all the services that the application is rendering. So it's always important you start those services. So we can always use sudo service MongoDB start. Now in recent versions you could, now older version of Ubuntu uses the service. Okay, recent versions of Ubuntu uses what we call system cuttle or system control, okay, which is what we have here. So either is still going to work. So we're going to start MongoDB. So we're going to come here and we say sudo system. You can use tab system control. You see that CTL? Good. So you can start and say MongoDB. You say started. Now if it didn't, as long as it didn't throw you any error, you're good to go. Let's clear the screen so that we can have something. Now the next thing you need to do is to check the status of your MongoDB. Okay, now let's do this. So MongoDB is currently running. Okay, and another important thing is to notice that it's enabled. If it's not enabled, you can always use the enable command to get MongoDB enabled. You understand? What's the essence of this? Now, it's always important that when you shut down your instance and you restart it again, MongoDB should be running. You do not need to manually start it up. That's the essence of the command. Alright, so now the next thing, we've done all this. Now, in building our application, we are going to require some dependencies, okay? And these dependencies are packages, okay? Packages which our program will rely on to effectively work. And to install these packages, we need what we call Node Package Manager, NPM. So you can follow this link here so you can understand much more about it. So let's use this command to install npm. So we will come here and say sudo apt install -y npm. So we're installing npm. Now npm is going to help us. Npm is also a repository manager. Okay, so it stores packages for most Node applications. Okay, so you can always look up the link to understand much more about npm. So one of the packages we will be installing in this application is called body parser. Okay, now we need body parser package to help us process files, JSON files, okay, passed in request to the server. You will get more details about this as we progress in the project. Okay, now let's be sure if npm is fully installed. Okay, it's almost completed. So once we have npm, we can now use npm to install the body parser package. Notice that we say sudo npm install body parser, implying that npm is what helps us to install body parser. Okay, now let's be sure it's done. Okay, good, it is done. So let's clear. Good. So we can now say sudo npm install what? Body parser. Am I correct? Now you need to be double sure, so you don't type the wrong thing. You need to be double sure. npm install body -parser, so you don't get a different error. Okay, all right, this is what we have here, and you can install. By experience, I already know it's not going to prompt me for anything, so that's why I'm not putting the -y flag. You can always put it, doesn't matter, and if there's need for it, it will prompt you. It will not prompt you either way. Okay, so let's clear. The next thing we need to do, now we've been able to install body parser, which is very important and will be required in our project. Now we need to create a root directory, a folder where we are going to create or build our application, and we're going to call that directory books. Okay, books without the quotes. Okay, so now the instruction here says make a directory called books and cd into that directory called books. Now let's do this. You come here and you say mkdir books and cd into books. Now you need to understand how this works. This ampersand and will take what is on the left hand side, it will execute what is on the left hand side, and if what is on the left hand side is true and it works, it will perform what is on the right hand side. But if it's what we have on the left hand side fails, it will not execute what we have on the right hand side. That's what the double ampersand and does. You could try it. If you remove one of this ampersand and, having just one, what it implies is whether the left one works or not, execute the right one. But of course, you know, in this context, you cannot cd into books when you've not created books. So if we had used make directory books and ls, it will just execute ls regardless of what works here. So that's what is going on there. So if you notice, it has cd'd into books. Okay, so it performed both operations at the same time. It created a directory called books, and then it changed into that directory called books. books. That's what we have here. Now, the next thing we need to do is to initialize this books directory for our project. We use npm init. Init simply means initialize. So after we initialize it, we need to create a file there called server.js. So the server.js is going to be our entry point. I'll show you what that means. So to initialize this, you use npm word init. Does that make any sense to you? Now let's check it to be double sure. See, this is npm init. Okay, so you hit enter. Now this utility is giving us a prompt that we are supposed to give, because this project is trying to tell us what do we call this. So if by default it will want to call it books, okay, so you can hit enter to move with whatever it gives you, or you can say books project, whichever one works for you, and hit enter. What version? You can say version 1.1, semantic versioning, or version 1.2, version 2.1, however the case may be. If you hit enter, it works with the default. Description, you can say a simple book register app. Entry point, by default it works with index.js, but in this case our entry point is going to be server.js. So we hit enter. So the test command, I'm not doing any test in this project, so there won't be any test command. I'm not going to use any repository, so I'll just hit enter. Keywords, I do not need that. Author is Dari.io. License, we could use MIT. Alright, we're good to go. So this is the JSON sample of what we have for our project. So are we good to go? Yes. So that's it. We're good to go. So if you use ls, you're going to see some content inside now. Okay, so that's package.json gives a description of what our project entails. Okay, so let's clear the screen. The next thing we need to do is to add these files, these codes, okay, into the server.js file, and this server.js file is going to contain this set of commands. Okay, so you do not need to bother yourself as a DevOps engineer sometimes with some of this codes, although it's not wrong if you have an idea of what it's doing. Okay, so the instruction says we should use VI, which is a text editor on Linux environment. So you could use VI, you could use Vim, which is VIM, the modern version of Vim, of VI. Okay, so when we come here, if you use ls, you notice we've not created the file. Remember, it said something here. After you do npm init, you need to add this file. You understand? So there are two ways. We could just use torch to create that file, but in this case I will just use vi and just say server.js. It will create the file for me. Okay, so I just hit enter. Now it takes me into the text editor mode. Do not be alarmed when you get into this screen. If you notice, you will not be able to do anything. Okay, this could be a very strange environment for you for the first time. So but just use your insert and get on with the project. Okay, now I used Ctrl V to paste what I copied from the documentation. So let's move out, escape, column WQ exclamation. Alright, CL clear. Now I always like to know the content of what I if you use the cat command, then server.js is going to show you what's inside the file. So you can always check this to be very sure it aligns with what we have in the documentation. It's very, very important. Very, very important. So now we've been able to do this. If you come here and you press ls, you notice that we have two files there, package.json and the server.js files. So JS file rather. So the next step is to install Express. Okay, Express is a minimal, unopinionated framework that's going to work alongside with Mongoose, and we'll be able to set up routes for our server. Okay, it's a framework. So to get started, we will have to install these packages, this Express and Mongoose. So you need to run this npm install Express and Mongoose. Notice that these are two different packages. You do not need to use comma to install both of them. So you come here, you say sudo npm install Express Mongoose. You need to be very certain you got the right spelling. Then you hit enter. Alright, we're good to go. This packages has been installed. Okay. Alright. So if you use ls, you're going to notice that these packages are increasing. Let's clear the screen. Let's clear the screen. Alright. Now back to our documentation. We've installed Express and Mongoose. Now the next instruction simply says, in books folder, create a folder named apps. Okay, just like previous, we'll create an apps directory and we'll cd into it. In books folder, do not forget that. So in books folder, we're going to make a directory called apps. Okay, ls to confirm it's there. If you notice, it's there. So we're going to cd into the apps. You can use tab to autocomplete. Okay, I love using autocompletion. It helps me feel like a boss. It's very, very good. It's a good skill to have. It increases the pace of your work. Alright, so the next thing we need to do is to create a file called routes.js. Then use the text editor to open it. Okay, then paste this command there. So what we will do is routes.js inside the app. So we'll just come here and you can use the touch command to create the routes.js. As you can see, use ls to confirm. You can now say okay. You see, use tab to complete. So it opens it in an editor mode. Good. You use insert. Now we need to copy this code block. This code block. Be very certain you copy everything line for line. Alright, do not miss the semicolon. It's very important you get everything. Okay, Ctrl V. Alright, we've pasted the command. Good. So you press escape, column WQ. You can always use exclamation or you could remove it, still works. Alright. Alright, so let's clear the screen. You can use the cat command to be sure that what you pasted align with what you have on the documentation. Alright, good. So the next thing we need to do from the documentation, in the apps folder, we need to create another folder called models. Then we cd into that models folder. So we are currently in the apps folder. We need to create a folder called what? models. You need to be very certain. And you also what? CD. You change directory into the models folder. Does that make any sense to you? So this is what we have here. Beautiful. Now, from this point, we're making progress. Very good. We need to create a file called book.js and paste this command inside of it. So let's increase our pace a little bit. So we will come here. Inside the models directory, you create a file called books.js. Okay. Touch. Professionally, let's just move on. Books.js. Like I said, you need to be very sure, double sure that you're getting it. You see, this is book.js. I almost used the wrong thing, which is book. Did you notice that? So book.js. Just that alone is enough to make this throw some funny errors. Okay. Go into insert mode by pressing I, Ctrl V to paste that which you copied. Okay. Escape. Column WQ. Alright, we're making tremendous progress. Alright, now, so this is just what is required to ensure it connects. We are setting the schema for the book application we are creating. So the next thing we need to do is to use Angular to access the routes, which is the step 4. Okay, now this requires us to go back to the root directory, which is books, excuse me, and you use cd //. What this simply implies is go to the previous directory, then you go to the next previous directory again. Okay, good. So which is going to be the root directory called books, and when you get there, you create a folder called public. So from here you do cd space .. You throw it and say .. and you hit enter. You see, we are currently in the books directory. So from here you make a directory called word public. You need to be very certain. Then you cd into public. Alright, so let's confirm. So this is public and you cd into public. And inside the public directory you create a file called script.js and you paste this command inside. So let's do that. So make sure you copy everything. Remember, script.js. Beautiful. So we use vi script. You can't use tab because you've not created the file. Script.js. So you hit enter. It takes you to the vi mode. So you use insert. So let's paste that command which we copied. Okay, good. Column WQ exclamation. Beautiful. So let's clear this environment. Next thing we do is we're making tremendous progress. So now in the public folder we need to create another file called index.html. Remember, in the public folder. Okay, so we just create the file called index.html, which is going to be for the front end. Now this is the front end code. Okay, now we're going to copy this code. We will copy this code and let's get on with it. So in the public folder you have to create another file called index.html. You need to be very certain. You go into the insert mode and you paste the command. Okay, All right, good. Now, this the language interpreters are smart enough to understand all the spaces you see here. So this is VI doing all the whole spacing and the rest, and the spacings and the rest do not affect how it works. Okay, so perhaps that crosses your mind. Clear? All right, we're making progress. Very good one. Okay, now we've been able to create the index.html in the public folder. The next thing we need to do is to cd back to the root directory and run the NodeJs server.js. So we need to go back to the root directory and call the node server to run this server.js file. So cd dot back to the root directory. So we need to call. Now, if you are not in this root directory and you use node server.js, remember we have a file here called server.js. So if mistakenly you come outside here and you are using node server.js, it won't work. So please do not forget that. It's very important. So cd into your book is capital letter. Okay, so we use node and say server.js. Once you hit enter, beautiful, it's working. So how do I know it's working? If you check here, you are going to notice we have server up http localhost 3300. This implies that our server is up and running on this port. Now forget about this deprecation warnings. So this is just from Mongoose telling us that we need to pass some flags, some parameters to resolve this constructor on it. So you can always use this on your code and it's going to clear this, but this is where we should focus on, and it's working very fine. If it gives you any other error other than this deprecation warning, then you must have done something wrong, and you shall not be thrown into shock, because NodeJS is smart enough to give you details where you can find your errors. It could be typographic error, or it could be a system issue. You understand? It could be a network issue too sometimes, because remember we are working on AWS, so you just read through the warnings or the instructions there or the errors there and understand what's going on. All right, so now we have our local server running. Let's go to this. It shall return. So this is what we have here. We've run this. The server is now up and running. It can connect it via port 3300. You can launch a separate PuTTY or SSH console to test. Okay, what coil command returns locally? So we're going to use the coil command, okay, to test it locally. So in this case, let's run the. So this is what we're going to run. So I'll just copy this. Copy, and let's use git bash. Okay, so first of all, let me explain what's going on. If you have, what you have here is you finish writing the codes into different directories. Now we run this node server.js to test our application, okay, and it tells you that server is up or server up at so port. You cannot test it, you can't verify, okay. You can press Ctrl+C to terminate the server from running. Nothing happens. You won't be able to see anything. You get. So and once this node server.js is running, you can type anything. Anything you type here, it's not going to be recognized as a command. Okay, so that's why the documentation tells you you can use another client to connect into your instance so that you can run this coil command. So that's what I'm trying to do here. Okay, so and for us to use another instance, we need to connect via SSH. That is why we use SSH to connect anywhere, from anywhere rather. So let's come to SSH using SSH client. This is how we are going to connect our SSH client. Okay, so if I know the public IP, I can just say SSH-I, my private key, and I believe you understand how to use this. So I'll just get on with this so that I do not notice I can just paste. That's the beauty of this. All right. Yes. Voila. So we're in. So let's clear. All right. Okay. So we also have instance. If you notice, city IP is the same. It's the same for this you get. So now let's run that command, which is coil, right? From the documentation, we're supposed to run coil. Paste. You see this? Now it returns an unreadable HTML document or commands or text. You understand? So all these are all HTML, hypertext markup language documents. You get? So these are tables and so on and so forth. Now because this console is not graphical and it's not designed to read this HTML document and present it for you in a readable manner. So that's why we are going to use the browser. Okay, so we were trying to just know the content, so that's why we use the coil. Now for us to serve this or to display this over the browser uses a different protocol. Okay, now which is the HTTP or the HTTPS protocol. Now, so in this case, the documentation tells us that we can also try to access it from the internet. For this, you need to open TCP port 3300 in your AWS web console for your EC2 instance. Okay, now you are supposed to know how to do this. That's what the documentation expects you to do. So, and if you've done all the projects till date, you should be able to get on with this. Remember, if you have any challenge, you can always send us an email or you can always drop your information on the Slack channel and we will respond to it. So now let us go to our AWS and open this port 3300, the TCP, Transmission Control Protocol, port 3300. Okay, let's ask this security group to, let's add this rule. So we will come here, go to the instances. Okay, I have so many other instances there, but don't bother yourself about this. I will just show you the instance that is currently running, which is what we are using, which is this. Good. Now, from this instance, I click on security group. I can always open it in a different tab or click on it. So I love to open it in a different tab. Now, so we have the only inbound rule here, which is SSH. For connection coming in, the only protocol permitted is the SSH on port 22. That's why we're able to connect using different SSH clients like the Git Bash and the AWS web console. Now, because we want to also use the web browser, the internet, the browser to connect into this instance, so what do? We need to edit an inbound rule. So by clicking add rule, so there are different protocols here. You can say all TCP, you can use custom protocol, you can use all traffic, but in this case we will just keep it simple and just say custom TCP, custom transmission protocol 3300. So, and you can just say anywhere. Okay, so, and you need to understand that this is for IP version 4 and this is IP version 6. Okay, now that's why you see two different blocks here. Good. So we'll click on save for beautiful. Now the next thing we need to do from the documentation, once you've been able to do this, you can access the book register web application from the internet with a browser using what? Your public IP address or your public DNS name. Okay, and how do you get your public IP address or your public DNS name? From here, you can get it when you go to your instance. If you scroll here from your running instance, you're going to see your public IP address or your public DNS name, which is this. Also, if you do not want to use that, from this running instance, if you click on details, you can always see your public IP address and also see your public DNS name, domain name resolution. It makes it easier. Okay, now I want you to also remember and understand that if for any reason you choose to stop this instance or you have power failure, this instance turned down, you had power failure and you came back, of course it's going to be running because AWS has uninterrupted power supply. That's one of the beauty of the cloud. It's going to be running even if your system shuts down. Okay, now but if you come here and you stop this instance for any reason, know that this public IP is going to change. Okay, good, but the private IP is going to remain the same. Okay, one of the reasons why the public IP address changes is because, of course, the ISP always changes or alternates the IP addresses, and it's going to be used up. So because we have limited IP addresses, so IP version 4 address rather. So now let's just get on with this. So this another way you can get your public IP address from the documentation is to run coil and this command as given here by the documentation. So when we go to this, let's right click, let's paste this command and hit enter. Did you notice this here? This is your public IP address. This is 3.142.149.101. If you come here, you should notice that it aligns with this. You see that? Good. So if you also run the next command, you should be able to get your domain name service name, which is your DNS name. Okay. Okay, so that's what we have here, which is this. Now, I always like there's a command I use, so you can also use coil and say http :// check IP dot AWS Amazon.com. Okay, let's use this. I turned it the other way around. Amazon AWS.com. So this is it. If you notice, it gives you can just run it again. It gives you the public IP address immediately. Okay, so you can always keep this. I always advise people to have a notepad or a sticky note if you're using Windows, to always paste these commands. You get used to them, and over time they become part of you. They become part of your arsenal. And if you're using Mac, you can always use your text meet or any other text editor you have there. Okay, good. So now let's use this public IP address. We can just use this public IP address and test it on the browser, or you can just click this. Okay, from the instance you can click here. Okay, now let's just come here. From here, let's just click here, and it's running. If you hit enter, this is what you may likely get. It may be loading forever, or it could give you an error message. Now please ensure that you have your server running. If for any reason you stop your server running, you may get an error. Okay, now in this case, do not forget this is running on port 3300. So hit enter. Good. Voila, this is what we have. This is our web application. This is our book register application. So you can just, what's the name of the book? DevOps Practice for Engineers. ISBN 23469. If you check Amazon, I'm sure you see this book. It's written by Dari, and it has 245 pages, and you can always add it. Now when you reload, you're definitely going to see it here. And so that's it. So this is how yours is supposed to look like. Okay, so you can always add your project. For every time you add, it's going to give us exactly what we want. Let's be sure our instance is running. Okay, this has frozen up. That's one of the things with this AWS Web Console. It's been idle for a little while, and because it's been idle for a little while, it froze up. So the best thing you need to do is to reload the browser. Good. Clear. Remember, I told you if you run node server.js here, it won't work. I told you have to cd into the books directory. Then you can run your node. You can use tab for auto completion, and once we have this, we're good to go. So this is what we should have. This is it. So test. We can have 3, 4, 5, 6. We can just say Dari, and we can say 2, 3, 4. And like I said, this is what we have. So you can have think and grow reach SBN 4567 author Napoleon Hill 200. It has different number of pages. You can always see different of this book. If you click add, of course, once you reload it again, once you click add, it goes into the database, and once you come back into the application, you reload it again. You can always click reload here, or you can come here and hit enter, and it logs in those details into the book. Alright, so this is our web application. So you've been able to implement the web min stack, and you've been able to replicate what the project. So if you've been able to complete this project, then you're ready to move on to more complex and fun professional projects from us. So I should say a huge congratulations to you. So remember, if you get stuck at any point, if you have errors at any point, you can always reach out to us on Slack, and we will attend to you. And that's all from us today. Thank you.